Travesty International, or otherwise known as Amnesty International, the so-called human rights organization, is once again beating the war drums for U.S. imperialism. Now, in the past, they're responsible for the bombings of Libya that killed over 30,000 people. And once again, here they are giving out another statement to justify the U.S. trying to send military forces, like actual U.S. ground regular forces, into Syria. The international community's catastrophic failure to take concrete actions to protect the people of Syria has allowed parties to the conflict, most notably the Syrian government, to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity with complete impunity, often with the assistance of outside powers, particularly Russia. Every year, we think it is just not possible for parties to the conflict to inflict more suffering on civilians, yet every year they prove us wrong. Right now, in eastern Ghouta, 400,000 men, women, and children who have been living under an unlawful government siege for 6 years are being starved and indiscriminately bombed by the Syrian government with the backing of Russia. The international community had said never again, and the government devastated eastern Aleppo with similar awful tactics. But here we are again. Armed opposition groups have retaliated by indiscriminately shelling 2 villages in Idlib, which they have also besieged since 2014. Well, there's a great irony to this, that the fact that they're calling on essentially the United States to step in on a conflict that the United States created to begin with. It's very interesting how they just happened to leave out the fact that it was actually the so-called rebels who violated the ceasefire agreement to begin with. They were the ones who were found to be blocking civilians from being able to leave areas that were under attack. They were the ones not allowing refugees to leave. And interesting here how they point out how they fired shells in retaliation to government attacks. It's very interesting considering those shells actually came first. Let's not forget the part that most of these are foreign fighters that are being funded by the U.S. are essentially invading this country to begin with. It seems Syria has no right to defend themselves against the invaders of their country, particularly the ones backed by the United States. So, you know, once again, Amnesty International is showing themselves to be complete and utter shills for U.S. imperialism. If this actually were the case and they really cared about human rights, wouldn't they be denouncing those groups inside of Syria that are causing these atrocities to begin with? Because we also have the recent news report by Syria that a chlorine chemical factory was located inside an area that had recently been liberated by the Syrian army. Yet the Western media, including Amnesty International, just happened to forget to report that. Like, you know, it's one of those things where it doesn't follow the narrative that they want to carry out about the Syrian government being some kind of overreaching, all evil kind of entity. But they just mysteriously forgot about that. If they really cared, then they would possibly be celebrating the end of the conflict inside of many of these areas that the Syrian army just recently gained a complete victory in, and that the people in those areas are now liberated and being sent to receive assistance from the Syrian government, the people that were so-called indiscriminately bombing them, yet can't come up with a single example of this actually happening because they were going after legitimate military targets, and then, of course, supporting the so-called rebels when they fired back. It's like supporting the invader of a country who was attacking on completely spurious, if not absolutely fake grounds. But it's amazing that when U.S.-backed groups, or groups that are being directly funded by the U.S., most particularly the holier-than-thou Kurds, these abuses are recorded as alleged. You know, even though we have proof they happen, they're called alleged. And when they completely make things up about the Syrian government, like they're responsible for the chemical attacks and no evidence presented, it definitely happened, but it's alleged when pro-U.S. forces do the same thing. I think it's about high time that this phony human rights organization finally be taken to task for the lies that they have spread in the name of the U.S. empire. Every time U.S. foreign policy comes up against a new target, like especially Libya, all of a sudden Amnesty International has all these things that they want to say against this government, many of them on completely false grounds with no evidence to say whatsoever. Yet here we have the United States, one of the worst human rights abusers in the entire world, seemingly immune to any criticism of Amnesty International. Oh, yes, they get token mentions inside of a worldwide, once-a-year worldwide report, but we don't really get that big vocal, you know, the whole thing is terrible. You know, we should possibly invade the United States to stop them from murdering their own people kind of thing. So I think that this is just another cheap attempt to beat the war drum on behalf of U.S. imperialism. And the people of Amnesty International, right from the top to the very bottom, should be ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed of the fact that they are nothing more than shills for empire in the oil industry, and that they really should reconsider their careers and really consider the morality of what they're trying to do, because they are supposed defenders of human rights.
Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.